We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
And the crowd roared. But would it happen? If he became president, would President Trump actually do this?
Presidents before have said it. President looks like he's going to do it.
I know. He's saying he's going to do it today at 1 o'clock. I think that makes Ben Shapiro pretty happy. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, syndicated columnist and host of the Ben Shapiro Show. Ben, what are your thoughts? When did you hear that he was going to do this?
Oh, I had heard actually sort of off the radar last week, and I'd kept it under wraps. I was pretty excited about that. It's obviously an act of not only political bravery, but moral courage to move the embassy, but just to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The absurdity of the U.S. policy suggesting that Jerusalem was not Israel's capital has resulted in idiocies like the fact that my niece, who was born in Jerusalem, it says on her passport Jerusalem, and then it doesn't say which country she's from. Jerusalem is only important to the world because of Judaism. It's important to Christianity because it was first important to Judaism. It's important to Islam because it was first important to Judaism. Jerusalem is mentioned hundreds of times in the Jewish text. Jerusalem is in the Israeli national anthem. The culmination of Jewish history really was in 1967 with the recapture and the unification of Jerusalem under Judaic rule. The freedom of Jerusalem was only assured, by the way, because of that Jewish rule. What President Trump is doing is not just a recognition of reality, it's also an act of political usefulness, because all of the negotiations that have been happening for the last 20 years, for most of my lifetime, all of those negotiations have been preconditioned on stupidity, that Israel is going to give up its eternal capital, which is insane. I mean, in order to understand how dumb that is, you have to think that for Israel, Jerusalem is about 1,000 times more important than Washington, D.C. is to the United States. I mean, the founders put Washington, D.C. on a swamp because they just wanted it to be not part of any state. The reason that Jerusalem is where it is because the Bible says it is where it is. There's a religious adherence to Jerusalem that doesn't exist for normal capitals around the world. And for President Trump to recognize that this isn't going anywhere, that the freedom of Israel is just inherently connected with the freedom of Jerusalem, and that any negotiations that are to take place are going to have to be done by the Israelis themselves, and the Israelis are going to have to make decisions about what to do with their capital. Well, it's a ground shift, and it's a recognition of a reality that's necessary in order for real peace to be achieved in the region, not based on false stupidities that have been promulgated for the last couple of decades.
So they have 6 months to actually do it. They have a 6-month waiver to actually do it. Monday was the deadline to actually make the announcement. So today, we're going to get it today officially at 1 o'clock. But it will remain a divided city. That won't change. Does that bother you?
Well, I mean, it will remain a divided city because the fact is that the authorities have basically allowed terrorism to spread among the Palestinians, and East Jerusalem has largely been occupied by the same people it's been occupied for the last 7 decades, namely Muslims who live there. That part of the city is very dangerous. It's been very dangerous ever since I can remember, long before I was born. The fact is that when I visited Israel for the first time when I was 16 years old, Israeli soldiers had to guard us as we came out of the tunnels under the Western Wall into East Jerusalem, which, again, the capital of Israel. If you are a Jew and you walk into East Jerusalem, your life is in danger. If you're an Arab and you walk into West Jerusalem, there's no problem at all, which signifies exactly why Jerusalem should be under Jewish control and not under Muslim control.
Over the millennia, few cities have been so contested or seen so much conflict as Jerusalem. Israel regards it as its undivided capital. Today, Donald Trump is expected to declare where he stands and honour a campaign pledge.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
But East Jerusalem has been under Israeli occupation since it was captured by Israel in 1967. Palestinians want it as their capital in a future Palestinian state.
The U.S. is delivering a lethal bullet to the heart of the two-state solution. That would be actually the kiss of death to the two-state solution, because Jerusalem is at the very heart of the two-state solution. It's the major pillar of it, and there has been many decades-long policy of the U.S., the international community, and everybody involved, including the Israelis and the Palestinians, that Jerusalem is a final status issue.
Moving the US Embassy from its current home in Tel Aviv could end up taking years. But today, much of the international community spoke out against President Trump's anticipated change to the status quo. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Russia, as well as the Pope, all critical. But also Britain, not on the same page as the president.
We think that Jerusalem obviously should be part of the final settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, a negotiated settlement that we want to see. And we have no plans ourselves to move our embassy.
On the ground, in this city of Palestinians and Israelis, as with almost everything here, the issue is divisive.
I think that it's about time, 3,000 years late than it should be, or 70 years after everyone admits that it's our capital city.
There will be new problems again. There will be a new intifada. Even abroad, as I heard in the news this morning, the Western countries are against it, even more than the Arabs.
Already in Gaza this morning, there were some small demonstrations. But in recent years, Palestinian protests have always fizzled out, the victim of weak leadership and fatigue. Arab countries may speak out today, but bigger problems across the Middle East mean for many the Israeli-Palestinian issue is less of a priority. President Trump has said he sees peace between Israelis and Palestinians as the ultimate deal. The chances of that, though, seem as ever very distant. John Donnison, BBC News.
Barbara Plett-Usher is in Washington. This is a break of policy that's been in place for decades and goes against the international consensus, Barbara. So why now?
Well, here in the U.S., every 6 months, there's a waiver that comes up for the president to defer the move of the embassy to Jerusalem, because by U.S. law, it's supposed to do so. So every 6 months for 22 years, presidents have said, no, we won't do it right now because we think it would be a security risk. So that's why it's come up now. December is one of those deadlines. And Mr. Trump did do the waiver in June, but he was quite frustrated by having to do it because he made this campaign promise. And so when it came around a second time, he said, we've really got to deal with this issue. And he decided that he was going to go ahead and recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, his officials tell us, and announce his intention to move the embassy, although that will be quite a long process. So his officials are saying this doesn't really change U.S. policy. They're simply recognizing a reality, which is that Jerusalem does function as the capital of Israel. And all of those issues that are very sensitive about Jerusalem, what its boundaries are going to be, who will have sovereignty over the east and the west, and what the status of the holy sites will be, all of those things, they say, will still be decided in peace negotiations. But we'll have to see how Mr. Trump makes the announcement. According to the officials who briefed us, it doesn't sound like he's going to offer much reassurance to the Arabs and the Palestinians that will calm their concerns that this really is a step supporting one side in the peace process.
So tell us a little bit more about the various reaction that has been in different parts of the world.
Well, you've had reaction in the Arab world from the Palestinians, of course, and also from the custodians of the holy sites, Jordan and Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, who is the head of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. All of them basically saying that this is really going to undermine the peace process, that it will prejudge the negotiations on the status of Jerusalem, that it sends a very bad signal, and that it could cause instability and violence because not only of the peace process, but because these are holy sites to Muslims in Jerusalem. Jerusalem means a lot to them, and that if they see the U.S. making this announcement, there could be a reaction. And you've had similar kinds of comments from the Europeans as well, from the EU and from Britain. So nobody else is talking about moving their embassy to Jerusalem. Nobody else recognizes it as Israel's capital. Really, the U.S. is quite alienated on this point.
Barbara, thank you very much. Barbara Plett-Usher in Washington.